No one noticed the horse at first. That was the strange part. The truck rolled through the ranch gates just before sunset, its tires crunching over dry gravel, dust hanging in the air like a warning. The cattle barely looked up. Neither did the men mending the fence. Horses came and went here all the time. Old ranch hands, half-trained stock horses, animals with more miles behind them than future ahead. But this one was different. She stood inside the trailer, unmoving. Not panicked. Not restless. Just still. Too still. When the back gate finally dropped, the light hit her coat, and the world seemed to pause for half a second. She was tall, elegant, her muscles clean and defined like they'd been carved instead of grown. A deep bay coat gleamed under the fading sun, polished to a mirror shine that didn't belong on a cattle ranch. Her neck arched naturally. Her head was high. Her ears forward, sharp, intelligent. This was no ranch horse. This was an elite show horse. And she had just been dumped. The man driving the truck didn't say much. He never did. He handed over a thin folder, registration papers, medical notes, a few faded photos from another life. A life with white fences, manicured arenas, judges' booths, applause. The kind of life this ranch had never known. "She's yours now," he said flatly. "Doesn't fit where she came from anymore." No explanation. No goodbye. Then he climbed back into the cab and drove away. The horse didn't follow him with her eyes. She watched the horizon instead. Jake noticed that. Jake had worked this ranch for nearly 20 years. He'd seen horses arrive broken, starving, angry, dangerous. He'd learned to read fear in the way a tail flicked or a hoof scraped the dirt. But this horse didn't carry fear the way the others did. She carried something heavier. Plus, they opened the trailers slowly. No ropes. No force. Jake didn't rush. He stood off to the side, hands loose, voice calm. "Easy, girl," he said, though he wasn't sure who he was reassuring, her or himself. She stepped down on her own. Every movement was controlled, deliberate, like she was still performing for judges that no longer existed. Her hooves touched the dirt with precision, not confusion. She didn't stumble. She didn't hesitate. But when she fully cleared the trailer and took in her surroundings, the open fields, the cattle, the rough fences, the wind carrying the smell of dust and manure, something shifted. Her ears flicked back. Her muscles tightened. This was wrong. She had been trained for perfection. For silence. For obedience measured in inches and seconds. She had lived a life of routine and expectation, where mistakes cost points and praise came sparingly. Now she stood in chaos. Cows moved unpredictably. The ground was uneven. No markers. No rails. No applause. No purpose. Jake watched her carefully. He saw the way her nostrils flared, the way her neck stiffened as a group of cattle ambled too close. She didn't bolt, but she didn't relax either. That night, they put her in the far pasture. Plenty of space. No pressure. Jake leaned against the fence long after the others went inside, watching her stand alone under the fading sky. She didn't graze. Didn't roll. Didn't lie down. She stood facing the darkness, like she was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Jake understood that feeling more than he liked to admit. Years earlier he'd lost his wife. Not to death, but to distance. To grief they couldn't bridge after losing their daughter in an accident no one talked about anymore. The ranch had become his refuge and his prison. Horses didn't ask questions. They didn't demand explanations. They just existed, and sometimes they survived. Just like him. Over the next few days, the horse, no name yet, kept to herself. She ignored the cattle. Ignored the other horses. When Jake approached, she didn't pin her ears or strike. She simply stepped away, maintaining a careful distance, eyes always on him. Measured. Assessing. She had been taught to respond instantly to human cues. Leg pressure. Rain signals. Voice commands. But now, she chose not to. That worried Dick. Because horses that stop responding aren't calm. They're protecting something. On the third morning, the first incident happened. A young ranch hand tried to move her closer to the herd, thinking she'd make a decent stock horse with time. As he swung open the gate, a cow spooked and ran. The sudden movement triggered something deep inside her, something old and untrained. She reared. Powerful. A warning, not an attack. The ranch hand fell back into the dirt, heart pounding. No one was hurt. But the message was clear. She was not ready. That night word spread fast. She's trouble. Too hot. Too fancy for her own good. Should have stayed in the show ring. Jake didn't say anything. He just went back out to the pasture after dark, stood by the fence, and spoke softly into the wind. Not commands. Not corrections. Just words. Source. Silence. The horse stood at a distance, watching him with eyes that had seen both glory and abandonment. Whatever had happened before she arrived here, it had broken something. And Jake had a feeling that if they pushed her too hard, too fast, she wouldn't just resist. She would explode. But if they did nothing, she might disappear into herself forever. And somewhere deep inside Jake, a thought took hold. Quiet, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. What if this horse wasn't here by accident? What if she hadn't been dumped, but sent here for a reason no one understood yet? By the end of the first week, the ranch had made up its mind about her. She didn't belong. The cattle avoided her. The other horses gave her space. And the people were the worst. They watched her the way you watch something expensive that's already broken, waiting to see how badly it shatters. Jake felt it every time he walked past the bunkhouse. The whispers. Looks. That horse is a liability. She's too hot. Pretty doesn't mean useful. Jake said nothing, but the words stuck. Because a part of him feared they were right. On the 8th morning, he tried something different. No halter. No rope. No expectations. He entered the pasture alone, slow and visible, boots crunching softly in the dirt. The horse, still unnamed, lifted her head immediately. Ears forward. Body angled away, ready to leave if she needed to. Jake stopped well short of her space and sat down on an old fence post. He didn't look at her. Minutes passed. Then more. The wind moved through the grass. A cow lowed somewhere beyond the hill. Jake spoke quietly, not to her, but to the empty air. I don't know what they did to you, he said. But I know what it's like to lose the only thing you were good at. The horse flicked an ear. Jake kept his eyes on the ground. They tell you to move on. Be useful. Fit in somewhere new. Like it's that simple. Her weight shifted. He stayed seated. Didn't reach. Didn't stand. Didn't demand. For the first time since she arrived, she took a step toward him. Just one. Jake felt it in his chest like a held breath. Then a cow wandered too close. The horse stiffened instantly, head snapping up, muscles coiling tight like wire pulled too far. She spun sideways, dust flying, hooves striking hard. The cow bolted. Jake stayed still. Easy, he whispered. I saw it too. She didn't run. That was new. But she didn't come closer either. Progress, Jake told himself, wasn't always forward. Sometimes it was simply not going backward. Later that afternoon, the ranch owner stopped Jake near the barn. She can't stay if she's dangerous, he said flatly. We run cattle here. Not therapy sessions. Jake nodded. She hasn't hurt anyone. Yet. That word echoed all evening. Because Jake knew the truth, resistance wasn't aggression. It was fear with good posture. And fear, if ignored or rushed, always found a way out. The next day, Jake brought out a saddle. Not to use. Just to exist. He placed it on the fence line where she could see it. Smell it. Remember it. Her reaction was immediate. She backed away hard, eyes wide, nostrils flaring, body trembling despite every ounce of training she'd once mastered. Sweat darkened her coat though the air was cool. Jake froze. This wasn't stubbornness. This was trauma. Something had happened in that show ring. Something behind closed doors. Something no ribbon ever revealed. And whatever it was, it lived in the shape of that saddle. Jake backed away slowly, heart pounding. That night he barely slept. Memories came uninvited, his daughter's empty room, untouched trophies, the silence that followed applause. He'd thought he'd buried all that. But watching that horse tremble at the sight of something that once defined her, it cracked something open again. They were the same. Valued only when they performed. discarded when they couldn't. On the 12th day, the storm came. Dark clouds rolled in fast, wind whipping the pasture into chaos. Cattle scattered. Gates slammed. Thunder cracked so loud it shook the ground. Jake ran. When he reached the far pasture, his stomach dropped. The horse was trapped. A fallen tree blocked her path. Cattle crowded behind her. The storm boxed her in on all sides. Panic radiated from her in waves, head high, eyes white, legs dancing dangerously close to breaking. One wrong move and she'd injure herself. Or worse. Jake stepped into the storm, arms out, rain soaking him instantly. "Hey," he called. "I'm here." She didn't hear him at first. Another crack of thunder sent her rearing, hooves slicing the air. Jake didn't retreat. He moved closer, slower, voice steady against the chaos. "You don't have to run," he said. "I won't let them take you again." The words surprised even him. She froze mid-step. Her eyes locked onto his. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The cattle, the thunder, the rain. It was just them. She lowered her head. Jake guided her, inch by inch, through the narrow opening. No rope. No force. Just trust built in seconds that should have taken months. When they reached safety, she stood trembling, rain dripping from her mane, breath heavy but slowing. Jake reached out, just barely, and rested his hand against her shoulder. She didn't move away. She leaned in. It wasn't dramatic. No swelling music. No applause. Just a broken horse choosing, for the first time in a long time, not to face fear alone. Jake knew then, whatever this ranch thought they'd received, they were wrong. This horse wasn't useless. She was unfinished. And the hardest part, the real test, was still coming. After the storm, the ranch felt different. Not quieter. Not calmer. Just watchful. The cattle moved like they always had. The fences still creaked in the wind. But every eye, human and animal, seemed to track the horse now. Word spread fast about what Jake had done, how he'd walked straight into the storm with no rope, no backup, and brought her out unharmed. Some called it luck. Others called it stupid. Jake didn't correct them. He was too busy noticing the small things. The way she no longer turned her body fully away when he approached. The way she lifted her head at the sound of his boots, not in alarm, but recognition. The way she started grazing again instead of standing frozen for hours. Still, the saddle remained off-limits. Jake didn't push it. He knew better now. Healing wasn't about erasing fear, it was about giving it somewhere safe to land. 3 days later, the ranch owner gave him a deadline. "We've got a cattle drive coming through the North Ridge," he said. "Extra hands, extra horses. If she can't handle pressure, she's gone. Auction. Transport. Whatever takes her off our hands." Jake felt the weight of it settle in his chest. An auction would destroy her. Too many people. Too much noise. Too many demands. She'd shut down, or blow up, and either way, she'd be labeled dangerous for good. That night, Jake stood by the fence longer than usual. "You don't know this," he said softly, "but you're running out of time." The horse stepped closer than she ever had before. Close enough that he could see the scars beneath the shine of her coat. Hidden under careful grooming and years of effort to look perfect. He swallowed hard. "They didn't see you," he murmured. "They saw results." Her ears flicked toward him. "I see you." The next morning, Jake made a decision that scared him more than the storm ever had. He brought out the saddle again. But this time, he didn't place it where she could see it. He placed it where she could leave. He set it on the far fence line, then stepped back and opened the gate wide. No traps. No corners. No pressure. The horse noticed immediately. Her body stiffened. Her breathing changed. She paced once, twice, testing the space. Jake didn't move. "You choose," he said. Minutes passed. Sweat darkened her neck. The past tugged at her from one side, the present from the other. Then, slowly she turned. Not away. Toward it. One step. Then another. She stopped several feet short, trembling. Jake stayed rooted in place, hands open, heart pounding. She lowered her head and sniffed the saddle. Nothing happened. No pain. No shouting. No force. She breathed out a long, shaky breath and stepped back. She had faced it. That was enough. For now. Later that day, the ranch owner watched from a distance as Jake led her, not saddled, just walking, along the outer edge of the cattle herd. The cows shifted uneasily. Dust rose. The air buzzed with tension. The horse's muscles tightened, but she stayed with Jake. Until a steer broke loose. It charged past them, head low, panic driving it straight through their path. Instinct took over. The horse spun, striking out, not at Jake but at the threat. A perfect, controlled movement. No wasted energy. No blind panic. The steer veered away. The herd settled. Silence fell. The ranch owner stared. "She just protected you," he said. Jake nodded slowly. She made a choice. That night, something changed in how the ranch talked about her. Still cautious. Still skeptical. But different. On the morning of the cattle drive, the sky burned orange and red. Riders mounted up. Gates opened. Dust rose like smoke. Jake stood beside the horse, saddle in hand. This was the moment. If she refused, he wouldn't force her. He'd walk away with her before he broke her trust. He lifted the saddle slowly, keeping his body relaxed, his breathing steady. She tensed. Then, miraculously, she stood still. He placed the saddle gently on her back. She flinched, but didn't explode. Jake tightened the girth one careful notch at a time, pausing often, speaking softly. "You're safe," he whispered. "I've got you." When it was done, he stepped back. She turned her head, looking at him, eyes searching. Jake met her gaze. "I won't climb on unless you tell me it's okay." He waited. She shifted her weight. Then she stood square. Still, ready. Jake mounted smoothly, barely touching her sides. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then she took a step forward. Another. The cattle began to move. And the elite show horse, once abandoned, once broken, walked calmly into the chaos of the ranch, head high, stride powerful, instincts sharp. People stopped what they were doing to stare. No one spoke. Because they were watching something impossible unfold. A horse who had been trained to perform was now choosing to participate. Not for ribbons. Not for applause. But for trust. And as they rode into the dust together, Jake realized something that sent a shiver through him. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of something no one on that ranch had ever seen before. No one expected her to last 10 minutes. That was the quiet truth riding alongside the herd as they pushed into the North Ridge. The terrain changed fast. Flat pasture gave way to narrow trails, loose rock, steep drop-offs where one bad step could mean disaster. This wasn't a show ring. There were no markers, no rehearsed patterns, no second chances. Jake felt her tension beneath him. Not panic, focus. Her ears moved constantly, tracking sound. Cattle shifting left. Hooves behind. Wind ahead. She wasn't waiting for instruction. She was thinking. A young rider lost control of a steer near the ridge. The animal broke hard to the right, straight toward a ravine. Shouts went up. Horses surged forward. Chaos rippled through the line. Before Jake could cue her, the horse moved. She lunged, not recklessly, but with precision, cutting off the steer's path, using her body like a living wall. Dust exploded around them. The steer skidded to a stop, confused, then turned back toward the herd. The riders froze. That maneuver, it wasn't taught on this ranch. It was instinct refined by discipline. She read it, someone muttered. Before anyone else did. Jake's heart hammered, not from fear, but from awe. They pushed on. The trail narrowed. Rocks shifted underfoot. A less sure horse stumbled ahead, rider cursing as he fought to stay mounted. Without prompting, the show horse adjusted her pace, placing her hooves exactly where the ground would hold. She guided them through like she'd known this land her whole life. But the real test came at the river. Spring runoff had turned it violent. Water fast, cold, unpredictable. The cattle balked at the edge. Horses snorted, refusing to step in. Jake felt her hesitate. The show ring had never prepared her for this. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hand against her neck. "We don't have to," he said quietly. She stood still, muscles tight. Then a calf slipped, nearly swept away. Everything in her changed. She stepped into the river. The current surged around her legs, water climbing high. Jake held his breath, ready to bail if she lost footing. But she lowered her head, widened her stance, and moved forward steadily, creating a path the others followed. One by one, the herd crossed. When they reached the far bank, the ranch was silent. Men stared. Hats were removed without realizing it. Someone laughed, half disbelief, half joy. "That horse," another whispered, "is something else." Jake slid down from the saddle and pressed his forehead briefly to her neck, overcome. She stood quietly, breathing hard, eyes soft. No applause. Just respect. By the time they reached the final gate at sunset, the story had already grown legs. Phones came out. Videos were recorded. Messages sent. The horse that didn't belong had just carried the entire drive. The ranch owner walked up slowly, eyes never leaving her. "I was wrong," he said. Jake nodded. "We all were." That night, Jake unsaddled her under the open sky. She didn't rush away. She didn't flinch. She stayed, as if she finally knew where she was. Jake rested against the fence, exhaustion and relief washing over him. For the first time in years, his chest didn't feel hollow. Watching her graze nearby, free and calm, something eased inside him too. Loss didn't disappear, but it changed shape. And sometimes, if you were lucky, it came back as purpose. The next morning, visitors arrived. Friends of friends. Neighbors. Someone from a regional riding association who'd seen a clip online and wanted to just take a look. Jake stood between them and the horse like a shield. "She's not for sale," he said before anyone asked. The horse lifted her head at his voice. The woman from the association watched closely. "You know what you have?" Jake smiled faintly. "A partner." She nodded slowly. "That horse could do anything." Jake glanced at the pasture. At the cattle grazing peacefully nearby. At the horse standing among them, not separate, not superior, just present. "She already is," he said. That evening, Jake took her out alone. No herd. No crowd. Just the two of them moving across the land as the sky darkened and stars emerged. He guided her toward the ridge overlooking the ranch. She stopped at the edge, breathing in the wind, ears flicking. Jake dismounted and stood beside her. "You saved more than a cattle drive," he said softly. "You saved me." She nudged his shoulder gently, then rested her head against his chest. It was a small thing, but it broke him. For a long time, they stood there together, two survivors who'd found something they didn't know they were missing. Down below, the ranch lights flickered on. Tomorrow people would talk. The story would spread. Titles would be written. Opinions would fly. But right then, none of that mattered. Because the horse who had once been dumped, dismissed, and discarded had finally shown everyone who she truly was. And in doing so, she'd given Jake and the ranch something they'd forgotten how to believe in. The story didn't end with the cattle drive. Stories like this never do. Because once people see something extraordinary, they want to explain it. Label it. Own it. The days after the drive were filled with visitors and questions, all circling the same idea. What was that horse really worth? Jake heard it in the pauses before people spoke. In the way eyes measured her frame, her movement, her mind. She could go back to the show ring. She'd win again. Imagine the price. Jake always answered the same way. "She's home." The horse didn't know the words, but she knew the tone. She stayed close when voices grew loud. She followed Jake without a lead rope, matching his stride like it was second nature. Where she'd once stood apart from the herd, she now moved among them, quiet authority replacing tension. She had found her place. And so had Jake. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Jake finally gave her a name. "Luna," he said softly. The horse lifted her head. It fit her, the way she moved through darkness without fear, the calm gravity she carried, the light she reflected without needing to create it herself. Over the following weeks, Jake didn't train her. He partnered with her. Some days they rode the ridges, slow and aimless. Other days, They worked cattle with an ease that left seasoned riders shaking their heads. Luna didn't rush. She anticipated. She thought. She adapted. People noticed. But Jake was careful. He turned down offers. He ignored messages. He chose quiet mornings over crowded arenas. Because he'd learned something the hard way, worth didn't always mean price. Sometimes it meant peace. One afternoon, a young girl arrived at the ranch with her father. She stood frozen at the fence, eyes wide as Luna grazed nearby. "She's beautiful," the girl whispered. Jake knelt beside her. "Do you like horses?" The girl nodded, then shook her head. "I'm scared of them." Jake smiled gently. So was she. The girl looked up, surprised. Jake motioned slowly, and Luna approached, stopping a few feet away. She lowered her head, soft and patient. The girl reached out with trembling fingers. Luna didn't move. That moment, quiet, fragile, honest, was worth more than every ribbon Luna had ever won. Jake felt it settle in his chest like a promise kept. Months passed. The ranch thrived. Word spread, not of a miracle horse, but of a place where broken things were given time instead of pressure. People came not to buy, but to learn. To watch. To remember. Jake found himself talking more. Laughing more. Sleeping better. Grief didn't vanish. But it softened. One night, Jake stood alone in the pasture under a sky full of stars. Luna walked up beside him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. "You know," he said quietly, "they called you elite." Luna flicked an ear. "They called me strong once too." He rested his hand on her neck. "Turns out, the strongest thing isn't winning." Luna sighed, a deep, content sound, and leaned into him. "It's staying." The next morning, Jake found a small wooden sign nailed to the pasture gate. The ranch owner had put it up before sunrise. "Luna's Field. Partners only." Jake didn't say anything when he saw it. He just smiled. And somewhere, far beyond fences and expectations, the echo of applause faded, replaced by something better. Belonging. If this story moved you even a little, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes second chances matter.